So hi guys, welcome to this little extra video. Now I can hear you asking, Penny, why have you got 10 bloodletters, 5 pots of paint and a bottle of primer on your desk? Well, I'm really glad you asked. So in last week's video I had a comment. Now I love responding to comments, but if you give me a comment where I can do a video reply, even better. So this is the comment I received. Penny, isn't it better to use a primer first? Now, I can't answer that with a yes or a no. Basically, in the context of last week's video, no primer is needed. But in general, I personally like to use a primer simply because it just gives me that safety measure. However, I know that Citadel base paints do make a good primer. Now the way I discovered this was many years ago. They used to do a brush on primer called Smelly Primer, which they stopped making. I don't know if they make it again now, but at the time they stopped making it. Now I emailed Citadel and I said, look, when is the new primer coming out? Because I do like to use, sometimes I like to use a primer with a brush, and I find that these primers are excellent, but as a brush on primer they're a little bit thin and wishy-washy and very hard to apply. And they responded back, and I'll tell you what they responded and I'll translate that to everyday language. They said, get yourself some Abaddon Black and just apply a little bit of Lamia Medium. Now Abaddon Black and Lamia Medium are products that they sell. Translating that into everyday language, what they're basically saying is get yourself a base paint. Base paints are better because of the pigmentation, and get yourself some thinner, thin the paint down, apply that as a primer. Now if you search my archives, you will find a video where I went out and I tested that theory on various paints, but I'm going to make another video. So what I've got is I have a Citadel base paint. I've deliberately picked different colours so that when I do the video you can clearly see which one is which. So I have Citadel base Mephiston Red. I have got the new Generation 2 Humbrol Acrylic. This particular one is some form of blue. I can't remember the exact shade. I have got an AK Interactive 11847 REF Cockpit Grey Green. I'll put this one next. I've got a Vallejo Model Colour 70.889 US Olive Drab, and then this one, which you may not see as often, this is an MRP acrylic. This is deep yellow MRP F005, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint two models with each colour. One is going to be primed and one is going to have the paint just straight applied, and then we're going to have a look at the durability of the paint, and I'm going to give them more punishment than we would give them as modelers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get in there and I'm going to rub the paint, which is something that we wouldn't normally do, but it will just test the viability. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to prime 5 of them, and what I'm going to do is I will prime the 5 models. I'll try and make sure I get some primer onto the base, and then what I'm going to do is I'll just put a little dot on the base of the ones that I don't prime, and then when I come to actually paint them I can just paint a little bit of the base, although actually I don't need to do the dot on the second ones, but yeah, what we'll do is we'll prime half of them. Okay, so what I've done is I've just got myself some primer. I've just chucked some white primer in there, and all I'm going to do is just prime these all over. Ooh, I think that airflow is just a little bit too much there. There we go. Didn't really want to apply that much. So what I'm doing is you'll find that the sound may not sync with what I'm doing, and that's because when I'm actually talking to you as I prime them, but what I'll do is I'll do an edit later on, just so that there's not so much chit chat, and then obviously the sound will get will be just as is, and the actual priming will be speeded up. So I had a lot of fun doing these. I actually did these on a live stream, and why have I suddenly not got any here? It's interesting. Yeah, so I did these on a live stream, and unusually for Citadel, I can't for the life of me think how, but there was a leg missing. So I've had to improvise, and these are chaos figures. They're actually corn demons, and if you know anything about Warhammer, you'll know that Khorne is a bit of a fickle god. He'll do things based on his whims at the time. So what I did is I fashioned a leg out of an arm, which I'll show you towards the end. It was actually the first model that I painted, so or primed, sorry. So you may have spotted it. And this one's got an arm that's fallen off. So that just shows the quality of my glue work. So this is the result of my priming. It's not the best priming in the world. I've just slapped some on, but as you can see, we have primers. So the one I had the problem with was this one. There was a leg missing. I don't know if I lost the leg or if it wasn't in the actual pack, but what I've done is I've applied an arm as a leg, and then I've taken the standard bearer's arm, I've cut the standard off, and I've just stuck a skull on it, and that's my chaos mutation. Now, if I was doing this as a proper model, I'd be filling all of this gap in to make it look a bit better. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, this is absolutely fine. One other issue I had is this one. I've put a yellow dot on the base. This arm actually came off as I was priming, so I've glued it on. So I've just put that yellow dot on, and I'm going to be doing this one last with the MRP. Just gives it a little bit more time to dry. So let's get some painting done. So the first paint that I'm going to use today is going to be the Citadel Mephiston Red. So I need to take one primed model and one unprimed model, and I was thinking about airbrushing this on, and but I think, do you know what, I'll just get on with it and I'll just get some brush painting done. So I'm going to take the Mephiston Red, and nothing unusual here. What we do is we thin this down to our usual consistency, and I've not got a small bottle, so I'm going to try and get this done with a big bottle. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint both of these models and all over red. One has got primer on it and one hasn't. So, and I'm not going to be perfect with this. All I'm doing is slapping the paint on. Now, I believe I know how this result is going to go. I believe that this one is going to be absolutely fine, because I've done this before and I do it all the time. Oh, that's really nice. This is the actual colour I would use. And the second one, all the others, some will work, some may not. Some won't work, and some may not. So let's get on and do some painting. So that's my Mephiston red done. Now the quality of the coat isn't perfect. I've only put one coat on. As you can see, the primer has made it a lot brighter. If I added multiple coats, then obviously the colours would come in again similar. But we're not here to judge my painting. We're here to test primers and paints. So the next one that I'm going to use is this Humbrol Acrylic Generation 2 Matte 89, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing. What I've done, guys, I think this actually is ready to go straight out of the pot. So what I think is going to happen, I've arranged these in order of how well I think they're going to perform. Oh, that's way too much paint thinner on there. I should have put some thinner on its own, really, shouldn't I? So what I think is going to happen is the Citadel paint is going to be fine, and I think the Humbrol paint is going to be fine as well. The AK Interactive is not going to, it might work, but I'm not sure. Well, that's really nice to paint with. Yeah, the AK Interactive I think might be okay, but possibly not. The model colour and the MRP, I think they're not going to work. So that's why I've put them last, just so I can arrange them. Basically, they're arranged in, I think, you know, it's like a podium, but with 5 places on it. This is really nice, actually. You know, I've often said I don't like Humbrol colours, but I'll be absolutely honest with you, I'm getting on really well with these second generation ones. Whatever they've done to them, if they've done anything, I might be fooled here. But the paint's sticking. I'm not using water to thin these down. I'm using my own homemade paint thinners. I tend to find it just helps stop the paint splitting a little bit. Sometimes, especially with the old Humbrols, I would thin with water, and I would paint on the model, and it would just split. But this will actually be a really good test, because if you paint onto primer, it's less likely to split, because the primer's changed the surface tension of the model, and it's given it something to grip onto. So, but the main thing is that whatever I do with these, the paint is the same paint for both the primed and the unprimed. So if it splits on the unprimed, it's just not quite going on so well on the unprimed. But yeah, if it splits on one and then not on the other, you can't say it's because I over thinned one and not the other. It's a fair test. So paint's still drying, but that's the Humbrol gone down very nicely, actually. I will admit that's probably, of the two, that's the best one to paint with. But that's gone down very nicely, and as you can see, as we expect, because there's no primer underneath, the colour is a little bit darker, so we would have to apply multiple coats to that. But we would be applying multiple coats anyway. Obviously, if we were using an airbrush, we would just keep applying until we're happy with the level of colour. So the next one I'm going to use is a colour that I really like. This is AK Interactive 3rd generation 11847 REF Cockpit Grey Green, and same as before, but I've learnt my lesson. I'm putting the paint down onto the palette, and I'm bringing the thinners into the paint. I can just bring in as much as I want. I find this AK Interactive is quite a thick paint, and then you can thin it down, and it's all trying to run. I think I actually wanted that much thinner on there. Now one of the problems I'm having is judging how much paint I need for two models. I really don't want to have to mix more paint up halfway through the model, because although I may not get the same consistency with all the paints, I don't want to be ending up with two consistencies while I'm painting. So let's give this one a go. Oh, that's quite a thin coverage, but this is designed more for airbrushes, so you can see it's very, very white. It's coming through there, but it's going on okay. Okay, so the AK Interactive's gone down again. It's still a bit wet. Now I felt this might have been a little bit thin. I might have just over thinned it slightly. I didn't thin it too much because it's still covered, but you know, this isn't a scientific test. This is just slapping some paint onto a model. The conditions that I've got this under is still fine for what I'm doing. So the next color that I'm going to use is a Vallejo. Is it Vallejo or Vallejo or something like that? I call it Vallejo. It's 70.889 US olive drab. Also has the number 92091. So this is one of those colors, I believe, that olive drab for one manufacturer is completely different for another. Each color is. Gee, I'm going to put a bit more on. I'd rather waste a little paint than not have enough, because as I say, I don't want to have to make more paint up during the paint session, and we want that paintably thin. Now do also take into account that each paint acts differently. In hindsight, I think perhaps I may have done with thinning the Citadel a little bit more, because that is designed for brush painting. This one is, well, it's their Air series, which means it's designed for aircraft, so you're more than likely going to be airbrushing it. But yeah, so different paints have their different characteristics. This is another nice paint, actually. It's going on quite nicely, and you may see a cat come into scene, or you may already have seen a cat, depending on how I speed this video up. Okay, so that is the Vallejo model colour applied. Again, it's still wet. Went down quite nicely. Quite happy with the painting quality. I was really glad that I put that extra blob of paint on the palette, because I actually thought I was going to run out of paint. I will admit I had a little prayer going on there. Right, so the last paint that we're going to test is this MRP water-based acrylic paint for brush and airbrush. This particular one is deep yellow, and I'm going to take no chances with this one. I'm going to put quite a lot of paint on the palette. So that's quite a thick paint. I don't use this one very often, so I don't really know how much to thin it. This is why I keep saying it's not scientific, guys. I'm just basically going with what I think looks right. Obviously, just keep thinning the paint until it's got a consistency where it's not going to obscure any of the details. These particular models are very highly detailed, and if you over thin the paints, then you just don't quite get the coverage, and you just have to go over on another one. But that actually is rather nice. Could do with being a little tiny bit thicker, because this yellow doesn't seem to be that strong, and you can definitely see it coming through, but it's fine. so long as it's the same consistency for both models, because like I keep saying, we're testing the theory on the primer, not how well Penny can paint. And I've always said before, I tend to over thin, because if I over thin, I just have to apply extra coats, whereas if I don't thin enough, it just doesn't look very good. So, you know, if I had thinned it so much that I had to apply 4 coats of paint, then that's the way it is. I'm more than happy with that. But like I say, we're just testing, and so far so good. Okay, so I'm going to do another little, I'm going to reorder them a little bit. This is very, very non-scientific. It shouldn't affect the final results. Now, I've ordered them into how I think they're going to perform. I think the Citadel is going to perform well. I wouldn't be surprised if this can be applied with no primer. This one I wasn't too sure. And this one I thought would be bloody useless without a primer. However, as I was painting, I'm noticing that the application and how easily they are to paint on. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a reorder. So let's have a look at these first of all. Now this is the Citadel base paints, and they've gone on very nicely. It was a little bit thick, but it was as I... Now without the primer, the application wasn't really that good. The primer definitely did help a little bit, but as you can see, it's gone on fine. But comparing them to the Humbrol, I say it again, the coverage is very good with that Humbrol, and painting it on was an actual joy. And this is how they compare without the primers, and this is the two Humbrols together. Again, much better coverage with the primer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the order of these. At the moment, I'll be honest with you, Humbrol is my favourite. Now, these two I think wants a reorder as well. The reason I say that, now I've got to be careful because this model colour's taken bloody ages to dry. If you look at the application, they're both as good as each other to paint on with, but look at the coverage of the model colour. It's much better. I can see me using less coats. So I'm going to reorder those. Now, as I say, it's a very non-scientific test. It may well be that maybe I thinned the AK down a little bit more than I did the Vallejo model colour. But look at the one without the primer. Coverage on that is fantastic. Really, really good. No loss of detail, so I definitely thinned it down properly. This is why I picked these models. They were difficult to paint. Look at the amount of detail on them. Can I have a... There we go. So much detail on there, none of it is lost. So I haven't under thinned them, and MRP can stay in bottom place. So that's really nice. I'm really happy with that. But look at it with no primer. So that's just a little bit of a reorder based on once I've actually painted them. So the top two are still the top two, and third and fourth are still third and fourth, and fifth is definitely last. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to leave that to dry for quite a while, because this, as you can probably, I don't know if you can see from there, as you can see, possibly four of them are, 4 colours are completely dry. This model colour is taken ages, really taken a long time. So I want to just let that one fully dry, and then we'll do the slightly more scientific but still not scientific. We'll do a stress test on them. Okay, so I've let them cure overnight. The model colour paint seemed to be taking an awful long time to dry. I don't know if that's quite normal. And I do want to stress again, what I'm doing here is not a scientific test, it's just a little rough guide. So what I've done is I've arranged them now, and I'm going to do a little stress test. I'm going to end up categorizing these into 5 stages. The first stage is I'm going to give them a little rub with one of these little dental brushes. This is far more stress than you would expect the paint to go through, but it will tell us you know, if the paint is stuck or not. If they survive that, then I will give them a gentle rub with a piece of paper. This is just a piece of toilet tissue, and I'll just give them a rub, and I'll see if I can rub any of the paint off. If that doesn't work, then they'll go through to the next stage, which is I'll give them a little rub with a piece of wood. That should give them a bit more stress. And then if they survive that, then I'll give them a little rub with my fingers, might even use my fingernails. We'll see how it goes. And then obviously if they survive that, then we know we've got the perfect primer. I'm not expecting any of these to survive through past the fingernail test, because that is far more stress than we would reasonably expect them to take. And also don't forget that quite often, especially in the scale model world, we do slap down a load of coats of varnish, which does give them a good protection. However, one thing that we do require them to do, we do require the paint to stick at least until we get to the varnish stage. So I'm going to always start with the ones that I'm expecting to fail, and then working our way up. We might get some surprising results. And what I'm going to do is, the first stage I'll give them a rub with my finger, because I think that's less stress. So we'll start on the obvious bits. This is the MRP, and I'm giving them a gentle rub, and that is coming off. Look at that. So no primer, just give them a bit of a gentle rub. You can see on the smooth bits that is coming off. So that hasn't stuck to the model with no primer. Especially on the flat bits. On the textured bits, it's not so bad. So that can go into the failed part. So now we'll have a look at the primed version, and giving it the same amount of pressure, I would say it's taken a bit of a beating, but I think that's surviving. I'll give that a survival. Okay, so on to the model colour, and this is going to be harder to see because one thing I didn't take into account was the paint versus the original colour. And do you know what? That is surviving. That is an unexpected result, but that is surviving, and that's not primed. So we would expect this one to survive as well, because this is primed. That's lovely. Okay, and this one is the AK Interactive. Now I was expecting this to perhaps at least survive the first stages. Do you know what? I think that's failing. Again, it's hard to see. I didn't anticipate this. I didn't think about this for the colours. So we'll give it a rub in a few places. And yeah, that's coming off. That's, do you know what? I'll call that a fail, but I'll call it better than the MRP because it's not full on coming off. But you can see in places. So I'm going to put it like that, so it's a little bit ahead, if that makes sense. Now this one I'm expecting to survive because it's primer, and that is surviving. Okay, now this one is the Citadel paints, and that's most definitely surviving. And this one we will expect to survive as well. Okay, and lastly we've got the humb roll. Now this has been surprising with the way that it goes on. This might actually be the winner, you know, and I was expecting Citadel to be a winner, but this is why we experiment. We have a hypothesis at the beginning, and the hypothesis doesn't always come true. So that I'm actually happy with, and there we go, that's fine. So at the first stage we've lost 2 models, especially this MRP. Now, as I emphasised at the beginning, we wouldn't realistically be sitting here rubbing our models like this, but if you were perhaps painting a model without the primer, and then perhaps you might not have time to finish them, you may perhaps have to do 4 or 5 days work straight. Each day you're moving the models for whatever reason. You know, maybe you don't have a proper hobby setup, maybe it's you're sharing the kitchen table. You can see that with a little bit of handling it's going to take some damage. Right, so next I'm going to get this dental stick, and I'm going to start from the end, work up, and I'm going to give them a gentle rub. I'm going to see if I can rub some of the paint away, and this probably should have been it's probably a tougher test than I'm going to give them, but I can't seem to rub any paint off, so that's actually doing okay, and I think these are all going to go the same way. So that's, no, that goes back in the pile because it survived, didn't it? Maybe that wasn't such a good idea to use this. Right. No, that's not coming off. Wow. Okay. I wonder if it's actually worth me checking the ones with the primer, if it survived without the primer. No, they're all fine, so this is probably a useless test, but let's try some oh, I didn't stick that on very well, did I? Never mind. No, that's fine. Okay, and this is the Citadel. No, that's fine. Okay. I don't know why I've tested the primer one first. No, that's fine. I thought that was taking a little bit of damage. Oh, I think that's taken some damage, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm just trying a different area. Yes, that's just starting to take a bit on his arm. So I'm going to be a bit strict, and I'm just going to test these other 2 again on the arm to try and be fair. Nope, that survived. And this one. Again, I should have picked a nice vibrant colour for all of them. Yes, look, I don't know if you can see there. It's starting to lose it. So we have actually lost 2 more. So already we're beginning to answer the question, shouldn't I have put primer down? The only one of the the only one of the unprimed models that have survived so far is the Citadel. So what I'm going to do now is I'll try and rub some off with a bit of toilet paper, and this is a much stiffer test. But I think this will give us a conclusion that we already know. There is paint coming off there, you can see it on the toilet roll, but there's nothing visible coming off on the model. That's a bad idea because I've got toilet paper all over the place now. There we go. Okay, and model colour. Now that I'm surprised with. That looks like it's coming off. I can't tell if that's coming off or I've just made it go shiny. Have I just accidentally developed a new technique here, how to make matte paint go shiny? Yeah, that's coming off. That is actually coming off. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, that's failed. That's really interesting. So the AK Interactive, and now I'm expecting this possibly, if the model colour has failed, I'm not expecting this to do a million times better. Nope, that survived. Okay, surely this one's got to give in at some point, hasn't it? The unprimed Citadel. Yep, look, I finally got this one to fail. That's clearly failed. I mean, you know, rubbing it with a bit of toilet paper is a lot to ask. Okay, that survived. Go for the Humbrol. Okay, and the next stage I'm expecting them all to fail, but I'm actually going to give them a light scrape with a fingernail. Yep. So that was a bit of a dig in, but that one's failed, as you can see. I mean, you wouldn't expect them to fail if you go in with a, wouldn't expect them to pass with a fingernail, but it is only light. Now this one is rather interesting. That's not going. I'll try a different area. That I am really surprised at. I mean, I haven't gone in heavy. If I go in really heavy, look, I can scratch it. I'm not counting this because I've purposely gone in really heavy. But if I just sort of rub my thumbnail over the top fairly light, the same amount of pressure to get that off, that survives. So that's going on the winner's podium. So wow, I did not expect any of these to pass the fingernail test. No, that survived. I mean, like I say, it's not scientific. Oh, I think this one's going. No, that's just barely surviving. But it feels like it's trying to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place them on the winner's podium like this. I'm going to put him in third place. I'm going to pop him in second. And this is a very slightly biased first place. When it comes to figures, I do like Citadel paints. And I do like AK Interactive when it comes to scale models. So there you go, guys. That's my stress test. So, did we draw any conclusions from these? Yes, we did. I think so anyway. So as we can clearly see, if you are using, remind me what that one was. That was definitely the AK Interactive. That's really odd. So if you're not using a primer, I'm suggesting from this result, do not use MRP acrylic and do not use AK Interactive. I think it's quite interesting where the AK Interactive finished, because With the MRP they were quite well, maybe the MRP was a bit now the Humbrol is fairly close. Look at the model colour, that's gone from one position, and the Citadel is quite close, but the AK Interactive is a huge difference between primer and unprimer. So if you're not going to use a primer, these paints probably aren't that good. Get them protected quickly. Model colour, I'll be honest with you, this did a lot better than I expected. So the model colour with no primer, that was quite good. I enjoyed that. And the Humbrol was a little bit naff with the no primer, which we would actually expect. Citadel with no primer came in quite reasonably, I thought, and the model colour with the primer came in last of the primed models. So what I think we're saying there is you do have to be careful with your models. Try to handle them as little as you could. The next one with the primer was the MRP, and I quite liked that. If you look at the difference between the primer and the unprimer, I mean there's only one coat, and that would always benefit from a second coat. Can you imagine what that would look like with two coats? Maybe it's the colour. And then the actual podium, you've got Humbrol, which really surprised me. I did used to slate Humbrol paints, and I've not, this is the first time I've used the Gen 2, but the paints that I've always used, the acrylic wise, are their other ones, the ones in these pots, and most of my paints are the ones that come in the starter sets, and I'd like to beg the question, do they really count as proper paints, because they usually need so much work on them? But no, I think I'm becoming a fan of Humbrol. So we will give that an extremely incredibly good third place. The AK Interactive, I found them, I mean I use these as my go-to paints for scale models, and I find that they're very thick, and they don't seem to be that well pigmented, which has never been a problem, because when I'm going to completely change the subject matter here, when I'm doing this black basing I want really thin paints, which is why AK Interactive has done well for me. So to be honest with you, when I'm doing figure painting, sometimes if I want gentle colour changes, I'll do glazes, and I'm now thinking AK Interactive for figure paints might actually be very good, because I can get those gentle colour changes. As you can see, I can still get a nice solid coat. That's only one coat. And then lastly, we've got tried and tested Citadel paints. The only thing wrong with Citadel paints is the pots, and you could decant these into bottles, but whatever you do, you're going to end up wasting some. But these work, and as you can see, they've taken the white bits. I do apologise, they're bits that I missed when I was painting. So actually I'm going to change this ever so slightly. I want to give Citadel and AK Interactive joint first place, and Humbrol a very commendable second place, to try and explain how well, how close I think this is. If you imagine this as a golf tournament, these are falling at the first round, these are falling at the second, these are falling at the third, these are falling at the fifth, and then these have won, have got whatever score. He's behind by one single stroke. That's how close I would call it. So yeah, my conclusions are, I will still prime my scale models. I will always prime my scale models. As you can see from these, perhaps I don't need to, but it does just give me that comfort blanket. And then so the primer will give me that nice base, then the paints go on, and to be honest with you, if we varnished all of these, I would expect all of these models possibly to come into the podium area, and so there is no substitute for that varnish layer. And in between the paint and the varnish, you need to be careful with the handling of the models. But my conclusion is, these humble little Humbrolls, I think that's my little star of the show. Maybe because I've used these so much. I mean, I've been using these for years, so I know exactly what I'm going to get out of them. And these I've only recently been using, but for a long time. But these did do better than I expected, I will say. But yeah, I think commendable, what's the word I'm looking for, commendation to the Humbrol acrylic Gen 2s. And there you go, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that little test. Like I say, it wasn't a scientific test. There could be holes in the way I did things, the way I thinned the paints. Maybe if you put the paint on thinner, I tend to find a thinner coat, 2 or 3 thin coats will strengthen it a little bit, pop a little bit of varnish. But as I've just been editing the video, and I thought I'll do the little face-to-face bit, the ending, last. And I'm not sure if I got them in the right order. I've placed Humbrol in third, but because maybe it's my opinion of Humbrolls in the past, I wonder if that's actually a winner. So guys, although Citadel and AK Interactive won this one according to the standards that I set, if you've got a load of the Humbrol Gen 2, don't throw them away. In fact, don't throw any of the paints away. Don't throw away even the model of the primed ones. The model colour came in last, but that's just the way that I tested them. The model colour, I will stress, these two which failed at the third hurdle, which is the Citadel unprimed and the model colour primed, they've still done well to get to that stage. I don't think necessarily you should be buying paints because they survive scratching with a nail. I think you should be buying the paints because of how well they go on and the actual colours, the accuracy of the colours. Now, one thing I've also noticed with different modelers is if you get someone who does primarily tanks, their preferences to paints may vary from someone that does figures or someone that does aircraft. I'm trying to look at this from a general point of view. My personal preference is figures and aircraft, and I would say a combination of the Citadel, Humbrol and the AK Interactive is probably going to work best for me on an overall thing. Anyway, look, I will end the stream there because it is getting on. Thank you so much if you've managed to keep watching this far. I really appreciate. If you have any ideas for me to test little things, I'll certainly look into it. And please keep your comments coming in, because as you can see, I do read all the comments and I do act on all the comments. Take care, guys. I'm out.